Marcus Chen stood at attention in the recruitment center, his small frame dwarfed by the towering recruits around him. At barely 5 feet 4 inches, he looked more like a schoolboy playing dress-up than a serious military candidate. The recruiting sergeant glanced at his application with barely concealed amusement. "Another toy soldier," whispered one of the larger recruits, earning snickers from his companions. Marcus kept his eyes forward, his jaw clenched tight. He had heard variations of this insult his entire life. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods of Detroit, his size had made him an easy target for bullies. But what others saw as weakness, Marcus knew was deception. The physical tests began immediately. While other recruits grunted and strained through basic exercises, Marcus moved with fluid precision. His small hands gripped the pull-up bar with surprising strength, his compact frame rising and falling in perfect rhythm. The drill sergeant counted 25 perfect repetitions before Marcus finally dropped down, not even breathing hard. During the obstacle course, something remarkable happened. Where larger recruits struggled to squeeze through tight spaces or lost balance on narrow beams, Marcus flowed like water. He scaled walls that others needed help conquering, slipped through gaps that trapped bigger men, and completed the course in record time. But instead of admiration, his performance drew suspicion. "Show off," muttered the same recruit who had called him a toy soldier. "Probably cheated somehow." The accusation stung, but Marcus remained silent. He had learned long ago that defending himself with words was futile. Actions spoke louder, and his actions today had spoken volumes to those willing to listen. That evening in the barracks, Marcus sat alone on his narrow bunk, polishing a small brass button on his uniform. The button seemed ordinary enough, round and standard issue, but Marcus handled it with unusual care. None of the other recruits paid attention to his quiet ritual. They were too busy comparing their performances and boasting about their futures as soldiers. What they couldn't see was the tiny symbol etched into the back of that brass button, a symbol so small it was barely visible to the naked eye, worn smooth by years of careful handling. Marcus had carried this button through every challenge in his life, a reminder of promises made and secrets kept. Tonight, as laughter and crude jokes echoed through the barracks, he wondered if his journey would end before it truly began. The lights went out at exactly 10 o'clock, plunging the barracks into darkness. In that darkness, Marcus lay awake thinking about the letter hidden in his footlocker. A letter that explained everything about his presence here, everything about his true mission. But that letter was meant for one person only, and Marcus prayed he would live long enough to deliver it. Outside, the night air carried the distant sound of marching feet as the night patrol made their rounds. Soon Marcus would be among them, if he could survive the weeks of training ahead. The other recruits saw him as weak, disposable, a mistake in the recruitment process. They had no idea that Marcus Chen was exactly where he needed to be, exactly where he had been trained to be for the past 5 years. As sleep finally claimed him, Marcus's fingers found that brass button one last time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove himself. But more importantly, tomorrow would bring him one step closer to completing a mission that had begun long before he ever set foot in this recruitment center, a mission that would either make him a hero or cost him everything he held dear. The weeks that followed tested every ounce of Marcus's determination. Basic training was designed to break weak spirits and forge strong soldiers, but for Marcus it felt like an elaborate performance. While other recruits struggled with weapons handling, he demonstrated an uncanny familiarity with firearms that surprised even the instructors. His shots consistently hit their marks with precision that seemed impossible for someone his size. Sergeant Rodriguez, a grizzled veteran with 20 years of service, began watching Marcus closely. There was something about the young recruit that didn't add up. His movements were too polished, his responses too calculated. During hand-to-hand combat training, Marcus held back just enough to appear average while still passing every test. But Rodriguez had seen real fighters before, and he recognized the subtle signs of advanced training. The other recruits continued their relentless mockery. They called him Mouse now, a nickname that followed him everywhere. During mess hall meals, they would loudly discuss how someone like him could never survive real combat. Marcus endured it all in silence, occasionally catching Sergeant Rodriguez's thoughtful gaze across the training grounds. One particularly brutal night exercise changed everything. The recruits were divided into teams for a survival challenge in the nearby woods. Marcus found himself paired with Jenkins, the biggest bully in the group, and two other recruits who clearly resented his presence. The exercise was supposed to last 12 hours, but 6 hours in, everything went wrong. Jenkins had led them off the designated path, convinced he knew a shortcut. Now they were lost in dense forest as temperatures dropped rapidly. One of the recruits, a kid named Sullivan from Iowa, began showing signs of hypothermia. His lips turned blue, and his hands shook uncontrollably as he struggled to keep up. "We need to find shelter and start a fire," Marcus said quietly, his first real words to the group all evening. Jenkins laughed harshly. "Right, like we're going to take survival advice from the mouse. You'd probably freeze to death first." But as Sullivan's condition worsened, Jenkins's bravado began to crack. Marcus took charge without asking permission. He found a natural depression between two large rocks that would provide wind protection. Using techniques the other recruits had never seen before, he quickly gathered dry tinder from the hollow of a dead tree and used his bootlaces to create a fire bow. Within minutes, flames crackled to life. While the others huddled around the fire, Marcus disappeared into the darkness. He returned 20 minutes later with an armful of pine boughs, which he arranged into an insulated shelter. He also carried several thick pieces of bark that he had carefully peeled from birch trees. "Emergency blankets," he explained simply, wrapping the bark around Sullivan's shoulders. By morning, Sullivan's color had returned to normal. The search and rescue team found them just after dawn, impressed that the group had not only survived but thrived in harsh conditions. Jenkins stared at Marcus with new respect, finally understanding that there was much more to the quiet recruit than anyone had realized. Back at base, word of the night exercise spread quickly. Sergeant Rodriguez approached Marcus during weapons cleaning detail. "Where did you learn survival skills like that, soldier?" he asked. Marcus looked up from the rifle he was meticulously cleaning, meeting the sergeant's eyes for the first time. "My grandfather taught me, sir," Marcus replied, which was partially true. His grandfather had indeed taught him many things, though survival skills were just the beginning. Rodriguez nodded slowly, but Marcus could see the questions forming in the older man's mind. Questions that Marcus wasn't ready to answer. That night, Marcus lay in his bunk thinking about Sullivan's grateful smile and Jenkins's grudging nod of respect. He was gaining acceptance among his fellow recruits, but that acceptance brought new dangers. The more attention he drew to himself, the greater the risk of someone discovering his true identity before he could complete his mission. The brass button felt warm against his palm as he drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a conversation from 5 years ago, when an elderly man with kind eyes had pressed the button into his young hands. "One day," the old man had whispered, "this will save your life and the lives of many others. Guard it well, my boy. Guard it with everything you have." The graduation ceremony arrived faster than Marcus had expected. Standing in formation with his fellow recruits, he felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. The past 12 weeks had transformed the group of nervous young men into disciplined soldiers, but for Marcus, graduation meant entering the most dangerous phase of his mission. General Harrison, a decorated veteran with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, reviewed the graduating class. Marcus had studied the general's photograph countless times over the years, memorizing every detail of his face. This was the man he needed to reach, the one person who could validate his identity and unlock the truth he carried. As the general moved down the line, shaking hands and offering words of encouragement, Marcus felt his heart racing. When those blue eyes finally met his, Marcus saw something flicker across the general's face. Recognition? Curiosity? It was impossible to tell, but the general's handshake lingered just a moment longer than the others. "Good luck, soldier," General Harrison said, his voice carrying a weight that seemed directed specifically at Marcus. Then he moved on, leaving Marcus wondering if the brief encounter had been meaningful or merely his imagination running wild. The assignments came 3 days later. Most recruits received postings to various bases around the country, but Marcus found himself selected for an elite reconnaissance unit stationed in Eastern Europe. The assignment was dangerous, exactly the kind of posting that would put him close to the international incidents his handlers had prepared him for. Before departing, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He waited outside General Harrison's office for over 2 hours, claiming he needed clarification about his deployment orders. When the general finally emerged, Marcus stepped forward with military precision. "Sir, I have something that belongs to you," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. General Harrison paused, studying the young soldier's face with renewed interest. "I'm not sure what you mean, Private Chen." Marcus reached into his breast pocket and withdrew the brass button, holding it out in his palm. The general's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His face went pale and his hand trembled slightly as he reached for the small piece of metal. He turned it over, examining the tiny etched symbol on the back that had remained hidden for so many years. "Where did you get this?" the general whispered, his professional composure cracking for the first time Marcus had ever seen. "My grandfather gave it to me before he died 5 years ago. He told me to find you when I was ready, when I had proven myself worthy of carrying his message." General Harrison's office door was still open, and he quickly ushered Marcus inside, closing it firmly behind them. The general's hand shook as he turned the button over and over, his eyes filling with tears he struggled to contain. "Your grandfather. What was his name?" "Sergeant Major William Chen, sir. He served under your command in Vietnam 1971 to 1973. He saved your life during the evacuation of Firebase Charlie." Marcus watched as the general's knees nearly gave way. The older man sank into his chair, staring at the button as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Billy Chen," the general breathed. "I searched for him for 40 years. I tried everything, every database, every veteran organization. He just vanished after the war ended." The general looked up at Marcus with wonder and pain in his eyes. "He gave you this button?" Marcus nodded, reaching into his other pocket to withdraw a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "He also gave me this letter, sir. He made me promise to deliver it only to you and only after I had proven myself as a soldier. He said the button would help you believe that his message was real." General Harrison accepted the letter with reverence, as if it were made of the most delicate glass. His name was written across the front in the careful handwriting Marcus remembered from his grandfather's journals. "He was the best soldier I ever served with," the general said softly, "and the best friend I ever had. I thought he was dead. He spoke of you often, sir. He said you were the only officer who truly cared about your men, the only one who understood that courage came in many different sizes." Marcus felt his own eyes growing, moist as he remembered his grandfather's stories about the young Lieutenant Harrison, who had risked everything to save wounded soldiers. The general carefully opened the envelope, his hands now steady with purpose. As he read the letter, his expression changed from sorrow to amazement to something that looked like determination. When he finished reading, he looked up at Marcus with completely different eyes. "Private Chen, what I'm about to tell you will change your life forever," General Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of military authority. "Your grandfather wasn't just a war hero. He was part of a special unit that has been protecting this country's most vital secrets for over 50 years. And according to this letter, you've been trained to continue his work." Marcus felt the world shift around him as his grandfather's true legacy was finally revealed. Everything he had learned, every skill he had mastered, every moment of preparation had led to this conversation. The mission he thought he understood was only the beginning of something far greater than he had ever imagined. General Harrison locked his office door and activated a small device that would prevent any electronic surveillance. The seriousness of his actions sent chills down Marcus's spine as he realized the true magnitude of what was unfolding. The general returned to his desk and withdrew a hidden key from beneath a false bottom in his drawer. "Your grandfather wrote about a special training program he designed for you," the general began, unlocking a secure filing cabinet. 5 years of preparation that he disguised as simple grandfather-grandson bonding time. According to his letter, you believe you're here to deliver information about a foreign intelligence operation. Marcus nodded, confused by the direction the conversation was taking. "Sir, my grandfather told me about suspicious activities in our neighborhood. Foreign nationals asking questions about military families, mapping locations of defense contractors. He said you would know how to handle the intelligence." General Harrison smiled sadly, pulling out a thick folder marked with classifications Marcus had never seen before. "That was your cover story, son. Your grandfather was protecting you from the truth until you were ready to handle it. The real reason you're here is much more important than any foreign intelligence operation. The general opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and maps that seemed to span decades. Your grandfather was part of Operation Constellation, a deep cover program established after World War II. We identified children and grandchildren of exceptional military families and prepared them for missions there parents could never imagine. Marcus felt his understanding of reality crumbling around him. Sir, I don't understand. What kind of missions? The kind that prevent wars before they start. General Harrison replied, his voice grave. Your grandfather identified you as a candidate when you were 12 years old. Your size, your intelligence, your natural ability to blend into the background while observing everything around you. These weren't accidents of genetics, Marcus. These were gifts that made you perfect for what we needed. The general pointed to a map covered in red pins across Eastern Europe. Your deployment isn't to a reconnaissance unit. You're being inserted into a network of international arms dealers who have been destabilizing governments across 3 continents. Your size and apparent youth will allow you to infiltrate their organization in ways that traditional agents never could. Marcus stared at the map, his mind reeling. Every pin represented a crisis point where American interests were threatened, where conventional military action would be impossible or catastrophic. But sir, I'm just a private. I don't have the experience for something like this. You have 5 years of the most sophisticated training ever designed, General Harrison countered. Your grandfather wasn't just teaching you survival skills and combat techniques. He was programming you to think like an intelligence operative while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary young man. Every camping trip, every puzzle he gave you, every story he told was part of a curriculum designed by the best minds in military intelligence. The general handed Marcus a photograph of his grandfather in military dress uniform, but this wasn't the sergeant major insignia Marcus remembered from family pictures. The man in this photo wore the rank of colonel, with ribbons and decorations that told a story of extraordinary service in conflicts that never appeared in official histories. William Chen was one of the most decorated covert operatives in American military history, General Harrison explained. He volunteered for missions that other men wouldn't survive, always working alone, always succeeding against impossible odds. When he retired, we offered him a comfortable life with full military benefits. Instead, he asked for permission to train his grandson. Marcus examined the photograph, seeing his grandfather's face in an entirely new light. The kind eyes that had taught him to fish and camp now revealed depths of experience and sacrifice that he had never recognized. He never told me any of this. Because he loved you too much to burden you with the choice, General Harrison said gently. He wanted you to choose this life freely, as an adult who understood the risks and responsibilities. The letter he left explains that if you ever felt ready to serve your country at the highest level, you should find me and present the button. The general stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the training grounds where new recruits were learning the basics of military life. The choice is yours, Marcus. You can complete your current enlistment and live a normal life as a regular soldier, or you can accept your grandfather's legacy and become something more dangerous and more vital than any conventional military unit. Marcus felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. His grandfather had sacrificed everything to prepare him for this moment, but the decision had to be his alone. Sir, if I accept this mission, what happens to Marcus Chen, the person? Do I disappear forever? You become who you were always meant to be, General Harrison replied. Your grandfather's letter includes detailed psychological profiles and aptitude tests spanning your entire childhood. You weren't just born for this work, Marcus. You were shaped for it, molded by a man who understood that the future of American security would depend on soldiers who could fight wars that would never be acknowledged or celebrated. The general returned to his desk and pulled out a new set of orders, already prepared with Marcus's name, and an assignment that would take him far from anything resembling conventional military service. These orders will take you to a facility where you'll complete advanced training that will make your basic military education look like kindergarten. After that, you'll disappear into a world where your size and youth will be your greatest weapons. Marcus looked at the orders, then at the photograph of his grandfather, then at the brass button that had started this incredible journey. He thought about the recruits who had called him a toy soldier, never realizing they were looking at something far more dangerous than any conventional warrior. His grandfather had prepared him for this choice his entire life. But now that the moment had arrived, Marcus understood the true cost of accepting his legacy. The room fell silent as Marcus weighed his decision, knowing that whatever he chose would echo through the rest of his life and possibly change the fate of conflicts he couldn't yet imagine. Marcus Chen signed the orders without hesitation, his grandfather's training finally revealing its true purpose. Within 48 hours, his official military records were quietly altered to show that Private Chen had been transferred to a classified logistics unit. To his former fellow recruits, he had simply vanished into the vast machinery of the military bureaucracy. The advanced training facility existed in a location that didn't appear on any official maps. For 6 months, Marcus lived in a world where his previous military training seemed elementary by comparison. He learned 17 different languages, mastered disguise techniques that could transform him into a dozen different identities, and practiced infiltration methods that would allow him to disappear into any crowd, any organization, any target environment. His instructors were men and women who had operated in the shadows for decades. They taught him that his greatest strength wasn't his size or his skills, but his ability to be underestimated. "Let them see a toy soldier," his combat instructor had said. "Let them dismiss you as harmless while you study their weaknesses and plan their destruction." The arms dealers Marcus was meant to infiltrate operated from a seemingly legitimate import-export business in Prague. They moved weapons to rebel groups, terrorist organizations, and criminal syndicates across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Intelligence suggested they were planning something catastrophic, but conventional surveillance had failed to penetrate their inner circle. Marcus arrived in Prague as Tommy Chen, a small-time American criminal fleeing drug charges in Detroit. His cover story was perfect because it was partially true. He had grown up in rough neighborhoods, he understood street culture, and his size made him appear vulnerable enough to need protection from larger criminal organizations. The arms dealers found him exactly where he wanted to be found, sleeping rough in an abandoned warehouse they used for storage. Viktor Kozlov, the organization's enforcer, discovered Marcus huddled against a crate of what appeared to be auto parts, but was actually rocket-propelled grenades. Instead of killing the intruder, Victor was intrigued by the young American's apparent fearlessness. "You know what's in these boxes, little mouse?" Victor asked in heavily accented English. Marcus looked up with exactly the right mixture of desperation and cunning. "I know opportunity when I see it. I also know how to keep my mouth shut and follow orders. That's worth something in your business." Within 2 weeks, Marcus had made himself indispensable to the organization. His small size allowed him to access storage areas that larger men couldn't reach. His mechanical aptitude, learned during those camping trips with his grandfather, made him useful for maintaining the electronic security systems that protected their operations. Most importantly, his apparent youth and innocence made him invisible to law enforcement surveillance. The breakthrough came during his 3rd week when Victor's boss, Dmitry Volkov, brought him to a secret meeting in the basement of an ancient church. Marcus sat quietly in the corner, appearing to organize inventory sheets while actually memorizing every face, every detail, every word spoken in 3 different languages that the criminals didn't realize he understood. The meeting revealed the true scope of the operation. They weren't just selling weapons to small-time criminals. They were coordinating a massive arms transfer that would equip a terrorist cell planning simultaneous attacks on American military installations across Europe. The attacks were scheduled for the anniversary of a military action that had killed the cell leader's family 15 years earlier. Marcus felt his blood run cold as he realized the date they were discussing. It was the same date his grandfather had rescued General Harrison and 12 other soldiers from Firebase Charlie in Vietnam. The terrorist cell had somehow connected General Harrison to that rescue and planned to target every base where the rescued soldiers were now stationed as senior officers. The intelligence was too vital to risk normal communication channels. Marcus made a decision that went against his training, but honored his grandfather's deepest values. He would have to break cover and contact General Harrison directly, even if it meant exposing his mission and potentially sacrificing his life. That night, Marcus slipped out of the safe house where the arms dealers kept their workers. Using skills he had learned during his advanced training, he made his way across Prague to the American embassy. But instead of entering through normal channels, he used a maintenance tunnel that his briefings had identified as a secure route used by intelligence operatives. General Harrison was in Prague on an official NATO inspection tour, a convenient cover that had been arranged months earlier. When Marcus appeared in the secure communication center at 3 in the morning, the general's relief was visible. "I was beginning to worry that we had sent you into something too dangerous for even your grandfather's training," he said. Marcus quickly briefed the general on everything he had discovered. The scope of the planned attacks was even worse than they had feared. The terrorist cell wasn't just targeting military installations. They were planning to use the stolen weapons to attack civilian targets in 6 different countries, creating an international incident that would destabilize NATO alliances and trigger military responses that could spiral into global conflict. "We can't stop this through conventional means," General Harrison said after reviewing Marcus's intelligence. "Any official action would tip off the cell and cause them to scatter. They'd just regroup somewhere else and try again." The general looked at Marcus with the same expression his grandfather had worn when teaching him the most difficult lessons. "There's only one way to stop this operation." Marcus understood immediately. He would have to return to his cover identity and destroy the arms network from the inside. It would mean betraying people who had begun to trust him, eliminating threats that included men who had treated him almost like a younger brother. But the alternative was allowing hundreds of innocent people to die in attacks that could trigger a war. "Your grandfather faced this same kind of choice many times," General Harrison said quietly. "The decision to do terrible things in service of preventing even more terrible outcomes. Are you prepared to make that sacrifice?" Marcus thought about his fellow recruits who had called him a toy soldier, never realizing they were looking at someone trained to prevent the wars they might have to fight. He thought about his grandfather's patient lessons and gentle wisdom, now revealed as preparation for moments exactly like this. Most of all, he thought about all the innocent people who would live or die based on his actions in the next few days. "I'm ready, sir," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet strength that had been forged through years of preparation and generations of sacrifice. "Tell me what needs to be done." Marcus returned to the arms dealer's safe house before dawn, slipping back into his cover identity with practiced ease. But now every conversation carried deadly weight. Every friendly gesture from Victor felt like a betrayal of trust that would soon be broken. General Harrison had given him the tools he needed to destroy the network, but the execution would require all the skills his grandfather had spent 5 years teaching him. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would use his access to the organization's electronic systems to plant evidence that one of their major buyers was actually an undercover police informant. The resulting paranoia would cause the arms dealers to accelerate their timetable, forcing them to move all their weapons to a single location where a joint NATO operation could seize everything simultaneously. Victor found Marcus that morning hunched over a laptop in the warehouse office, apparently struggling with an inventory program. "Problems, little mouse?" the big Russian asked with genuine concern. Marcus had learned that beneath Victor's threatening exterior was a man who had genuinely come to care about the young American who worked so hard and asked for so little. "Just trying to figure out why our Prague buyer's payment patterns look so strange," Marcus replied, his voice perfectly casual. "See this? He always pays exactly 48 hours after placing orders, every single time. That's not normal buyer behavior. Normal people vary their payments based on cash flow, other expenses, business cycles." Victor leaned over Marcus's shoulder to examine the screen, his breath smelling of coffee and cigarettes. The payment pattern Marcus was showing him was actually completely fabricated, created using techniques he had learned during his advanced training. But to Victor's untrained eye, it looked exactly like the kind of systematic behavior that indicated police surveillance. "You think Alexei is informant?" Victor asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Alexei Petrov was one of their largest buyers, a man who purchased weapons for distribution to 3 different criminal organizations across the Czech Republic. If he was working with police, it would explain how authorities had been getting so close to their operations lately. Marcus shrugged, maintaining the appearance of casual observation rather than deliberate investigation. "I'm probably wrong, but my dad used to run numbers in Detroit before he got caught. He always said the guys who got arrested were the ones who did everything too perfectly, too systematically. Real criminals are messy and consistent." The seed was planted. Within hours, Victor had reported Marcus's observation to Dmitry Volkov, who began his own investigation into Alexei's activities. By evening, the entire organization was consumed with paranoia about police infiltration. Dmitri decided to consolidate all their weapons into their most secure location, an abandoned monastery outside Prague, where they could control access and monitor for surveillance. Marcus volunteered to help with the consolidation, his eagerness to assist seeming perfectly natural for a young man trying to prove his loyalty. As they loaded trucks with crates of automatic weapons, rocket launchers, and explosives, Marcus mentally cataloged every piece of equipment for the intelligence reports he would have to file after the operation concluded. The monastery was a perfect location for what General Harrison had planned. Built in the 12th century on a hillside overlooking a river valley, it had only one road leading in or out. The NATO team could seal the location completely while specialized units moved in to secure the weapons and arrest everyone involved. But as the final truck arrived at the monastery and Marcus helped unload the last of the weapons, he realized something had gone terribly wrong. Dmitri wasn't just consolidating weapons for security. He was preparing for an immediate strike against their first target, a NATO communications facility that coordinated intelligence sharing across Eastern Europe. "We move tonight," Dmitri announced to the assembled group. "Alexei's betrayal means our window of opportunity is closing. We hit the communications center, take control of their systems, and use their own networks to coordinate our other attacks. By morning, we will have struck a blow against Western imperialism that will be remembered for generations." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The NATO operation wasn't scheduled to begin for another 18 hours. If the arms dealers attacked the communications facility tonight, they would kill dozens of personnel and potentially trigger the international incident they had been planning all along. His mission to prevent catastrophe was about to become a catastrophe itself. In that moment, Marcus understood why his grandfather had carried the weight of so many secrets, why General Harrison had warned him about the psychological cost of this kind of work. Sometimes preventing evil required choices that would haunt you forever. Sometimes saving many lives meant destroying the lives of people who had shown you kindness. Victor approached Marcus as they prepared the weapons for transport to the communications facility. "You stay here, little mouse," he said with paternal concern. "This work is too dangerous for someone your age." The irony was devastating. Victor was trying to protect the very person who was about to destroy everything he had worked for. Marcus nodded gratefully, then waited exactly 17 minutes after the convoy departed, before activating the secure communication device General Harrison had given him. The NATO response team had been positioned nearby, waiting for his signal. Within minutes, military helicopters were converging on the monastery, while ground units moved to intercept the weapon convoy. The final phase of the operation unfolded with precise military efficiency. The arms dealers were captured without shots being fired, their weapons secured before they could be used in any attacks. The terrorist cell's plans collapsed as their weapon suppliers vanished into military custody. The international crisis that could have destabilized governments and cost thousands of lives was quietly averted before most people even knew it had existed. Marcus Chen officially died in a training accident 2 weeks later. His military funeral, attended by the fellow recruits who had once called him a toy soldier. General Harrison delivered the eulogy, speaking about a young man who had served his country with honor and distinction. The words were true, though the assembled mourners could never understand their real meaning. The man who had been Marcus Chen disappeared into a new identity, carrying his grandfather's legacy into missions that would never be recorded in any official history. Years later, when other young recruits were dismissed as too small, too weak, or too insignificant for real military service, they might find themselves face to face with a quiet professional who understood exactly how much strength could hide behind an unassuming appearance. The brass button that had started Marcus's journey now resided in General Harrison's private collection, a reminder that the most important battles are often fought by soldiers, whose names will never appear on monuments or in history books. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who let the world dismiss them as toy soldiers, while they quietly save it from dangers it will never know existed.